Hello again, everyone. We are back on the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings. I am your usual host, Michael Moore, along with my usual co-host, Russell Clay. How are you doing, Russ?
Doing awesome. Ready to
Good.
get back to it.
Yeah, we apologize. That was my bad last week. I was sprung a trip to New Orleans by my wife, and couldn't make the podcast, but I was doing what you'll be all glad to know what everyone should do in New Orleans, which is visit, of course, the World War II Museum over on downtown, which was very delightful. And that's all I'll say about my time in New Orleans, because this is a family show, Russ, so I want to keep it that way.
Gotcha.
But nonetheless, we are back this week. A lot of stuff happening in week 4. So let's just jump right in, Russ. News the notes section like we usually do. I think the big news today, I mean, not so much with direct fantasy impact, but definitely with direct NFL impact. Our long national nightmare is over. Joe Philbin was fired today by the Dolphins. They started off 1-3, obviously a lot higher expectations heading into this year, but they just weren't getting it done. Offensively, defensively, it just pretty much was same old, same old. So I guess my question, Russ, is how does this affect Dolphins fantasy-wise? I mean, you've got Ryan Tannehill, who, wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire before. Does this do anything to maybe, I don't know, like relieve the pressure a little bit now that there's not so much tension? Or what does this do for those guys there?
I guess this is sort of a narrative street perspective, but there's been a lot of sort of proof when a team loses a coach that they've given up on, sort of those next few weeks, they play really well. I remember it happened with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few years ago. And after those few weeks, they didn't play so well after that, but it just seems like the next few weeks, and I think this Dolphins team is really talented. I think they were just so sold out on their coach, kind of like the Falcons last year. They just need someone new in there. So if they get an interim coach in there, I think they could turn it around a little bit, because I don't think this start sort of represents the actual talent on their team.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is something to be said about, maybe being a little more loose now that the decision's been made. People aren't walking on eggshells anymore. They can sort of let it fly a little bit. And look, luckily for the team in general, it's still pretty early on in the season that, they could turn it around. Now, that's not to say they're going to win 12 straight and get home field advantage. But look, it's not that far off to say, hey, they could go 8-4 the rest of the way and sneak in on the wild card. So
yeah, turns out they have a really tough division this year. So
yeah.
it would be tough to really turn it around. But these guys are players, so when something's swirling around like that and it finally gets relieved, there's a lot of stress off on that team now,
Yeah, well, and I know you had mentioned offline, guys like Devonta Parker, might be cut loose now, and might flourish even. I mean, Kenny Stills had a good day yesterday,
Yep.
Finally. I know we were all waiting for that. So who knows? Maybe they, air it out more and they take more risks, and in turn provides all of us more fantasy points. So I think the bottom line is it can't get much worse there.
Right.
So,
it was literally the worst it was going to be. So
right. So who knows? They might be a good. Some of those guys might be a good buy low, but you all will just have to wait for later in the show to find out. So. All right, so let's move on to some injury news, Russ, like we tend to always do on the Fantasy Slant. Lance Dunbar last night for Dallas had a pretty good injury. I think sprained MCL. Probably going to be out for the season, which, I do know a couple people that were tweeting that they never thought they'd see the day that Lance Dunbar's injury would have a pretty big effect on fantasy, but nonetheless, here we are. So without Dunbar there for Dallas now, Russ, as sort of the receiving threat out of the backfield, obviously they're already down with Romo. They're not going with Dez Bryant. There wasn't a whole lot of options there to make plays. So what does this do for Dallas in general?
This is just a mess right now. And first on Dunbar, you got to feel for the guy. He worked his way from nothing to sort of this nice role. Finally got that opportunity and was playing awesome, and then on a punt return or kick return last night. It was just all over. So, but this gives Christine Michael a shot. Like, he's become sort of a punchline to a joke the past year or two. But I mean, the measurables are there. So he's definitely going to get a shot now. He got a carry last night that 2 defenders were in the backfield before anything happened. But Joseph Randall has been all right, but they're clearly not happy with him and not going to use him in a feature role. McFadden has been sort of back to Oakland McFadden, which is just a below average NFL.
Which is not good McFadden.
No.
if anyone was wondering.
So this Dallas team is just one to avoid other than Jason Witten right now. I mean, Terrence Williams made a nice play, but he's not going to be consistent week to week. So it's just a big mess.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, like you said, you've got old reliable and Jason Witten, but yeah, there's just a lot of question marks with that Dallas team, which is really unfortunate because when when they've got everyone healthy and they're on their A game, I mean, it's truly one of the top offenses in the league and in fantasy, obviously. But, it's just tough to win and do well when you're literally top 3 players on offense and top 3 players on defense aren't playing.
Sean Lee last night too, gone with concussion, or I believe it was concussion, and it's just like all their best players are gone.
Right. So, look, I truly believe, and hopefully this will be the last time we circle the Christine Michael train. But this has got to be his last chance, right?
Yeah,
I mean, not just fantasy wise, just in the NFL.
This is comparable to sort of Trent Richardson getting his last chance with Oakland this year. It's if it doesn't happen now, I don't see how he's going to get another legit opportunity.
And he will leave the league with possibly the largest truther movement in the fantasy world. That's for sure. So, but all right. Anyway, so let's go, Russ. Man, we're just talking about messes on news and notes section, but. Let's head to Houston with the quarterback situation there, which I think is the epitome of situation. So you've got let's go in chronological order. So Brian Hoyer was named the starter to start the season. After one game, Russ, they go to Ryan Mallett, or maybe it was 2 games, where he promptly throws like 50 times a game, is not very efficient, obviously. They give him another start this week, and he's yanked for Brian Hoyer. So now just this afternoon, Coach Bill Bryan said he was going back to Ryan Mallett for next week. So other than the obvious, Russ, which this is just a cluster, what can we take away from this whole scenario?
DeAndre Hopkins is going to get pelted with targets all season, and for those of you that bought him all off season or in your redraft leagues, you are in for a top 5-ish finish because he's not going to get this many targets all year, but he's definitely the favorite to lead the league in targets right now. I don't see anyone else even coming. I mean, Julio doesn't get as many targets because the Falcons are so much more efficient, So like Julio's going to have down weeks because the running backs got 3 touchdowns, or Leonard Hankerson went for 2 random touchdowns or something like that. So he's going to have down weeks, but every week it seems like Mallett or Hoyer is going to be throwing 40 or 50 times in a losing effort.
Or both of them are throwing 50 times a game. Who knows?
And we can kind of blame the Dolphins for Philbin. We can't blame the Cowboys for all these injuries. This is completely on the Texans. They did nothing all off season, and they decided that this was their plan, and nobody believed it was going to work, and it's exactly what everyone other than them thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and it's one of those great hypotheticals. If you're a Texans fan, is if Teddy Bridgewater in last year's draft just dropped one more spot, they could have had him and potentially solved their quarterback problem for the foreseeable future. But unfortunately, it was just not meant to be, and DeAndre Hopkins will just go about getting 22 targets a game, just like he did yesterday. So, So looking at Hopkins, Russ, and I think it's fair to say right now, I mean, with the exception of Arian Foster, who is sort of to be determined, where are you ranking Hopkins the rest of the way? Is he a clear-cut wide receiver one for you?
So before the season, I think I had him like for season long ranks, I had him like wide receiver 14 or wide receiver 15. He's moving into wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8 right now. Like he's potentially a high end wide receiver 1 going forward. I mean, if Foster comes back, that might take away a few targets, but that'll help him too. So it's happening for him this year, you know?
Yeah, and I think you sort of touched on something, whether the Texans suddenly get good, which I don't foresee happening, or they remain bad, which I definitely see happening. Hopkins is a big part of that. I mean, if they're behind, 2 or 3 touchdowns like they were yesterday, guess what? They're going to chuck it up to DeAndre 22 times like they did. At the same time, part of their game plan is going to be to get him the ball in order to win. So, yeah, it's a win-win situation for DeAndre. Yeah. He's, I've been hesitant, like for example in DraftKings, to get him because I keep expecting that price to not live up to it. But I'm sold now. I mean, if he's in the 7,000 to 8,000 range on DraftKings, I would probably pay that. So
we joked like all off season about him getting 180 to 200 targets, but I mean,
it's gonna happen.
He has 60 through the first 4 games.
Right.
Like that is insane.
Well, and you've got Cecil Shorts now, who got injured yesterday. So, I mean, not that Cecil Shorts was going to eat into DeAndre Hopkins' targets a whole lot, but look, that's just another reason why, DeAndre is probably going to see the ball quite a bit going forward.
So he needs 140 targets in the last 12 games to get 200.
Yeah, I think that's pretty
I think
good.
He could do it.
I don't see the Texans like sitting on a lead very often this season.
No.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that's probably going to happen. But oh well, that's okay. If you're a DeAndre Hopkins owner, like you said, then more power to you. So all right, Russ, let's end the news and notes section on a high note, shall we? Rookie Todd Gurley out for the first 2 games, got limited action last week, but completely broke out yesterday against, what's funny is I don't think anyone expected his breakout game to be against Arizona, but it completely was. He literally ran wild yesterday. I'm looking up exactly what he had, but he had over 100 yards. The Rams upset the Cardinals, which again, I don't know anyone that would have thought that. So, it's a good start, Russ. Where does this put Gurley for you as far as, rest of the way rankings?
Considering the dumpster fire that is the high-end running backs right now, I mean, Charles and Le'Veon are looking pretty good, but and Adrian Peterson, but man, that 5 to 15 range of running backs, the top 5 to 15, it's just wide open. So if you're looking for sort of an Odell Beckham-ish type player, this would be him. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but if you're looking for that type of upside in the second half of the year, I think he's that type. I'd put him in my top. I'd put him at like RB10 right now going forward. I think they're going to ride him.
And the funny part is and usually I'm fairly conservative. I think that's too low for him.
Oh.
I think he could potentially be a top 5 guy. Well, not potentially. I think he is a top 5 guy right now. He's got no competition behind him. Right. The offensive line, I think, did its job yesterday.
They look good, yeah.
I think honestly, and I don't think it's a surprise to say this. I think the thing that could hold him back is if Nick Foles is not feeling it someday. Because Nick Foles is just up and down. So, and look, yesterday Nick Foles had a good day. He had 3 touchdowns, very efficient, but there's going to be days when Nick Foles is not throwing 3 touchdowns and they're going to be scrambling to make plays. That might give me some pause, but still, it's not enough to say he's not going to be a top 5 guy. He had 146 yards yesterday on just 19 carries.
And
7 yards a carry.
on his last 2 runs, he sort of gave up on the play to stay in bounds to run more clock, which I'm in love with. I'm in love with that he's that smart already. But like you look at his college career was fantastic. Draft position, awesome. His production and his usage this week, just everything points to feature workhorse back. So he's got everything. So, yeah.
He does. And look, I think you hit on a very important point for this year anyway in the fantasy world, which is there just aren't any clear-cut RB1s out there. I mean, you've got several guys that are capable of turning an RB1 performance in week to week, but by no means are they reliable. There may be 3, like you said, that I think you could count on every single week to be a top 5 or top 10 guy. But personally, I'm putting Gurley up there now. I think, like you said, the draft position, the situation, all of it, I think, leads to good things. So,
and Seahawks at home is going to be a tough game, but the NFC West isn't necessarily what it used to be either. 49ers are struggling, and he just beat up the Cardinals, who the Rams always play well. So, crazy.
I'm in, man. I'm in. Let's go. Let's ride that Gurley train now. All right, very good. So that covered the good, the bad, and the ugly this week, Russ. So let's hit on some, I guess, quasi news and notes, which would be a couple of players are coming back from suspension in week 5. You've got Martavis Bryant, receiver for Pittsburgh, and you've got Antonio Gates, the ageless wonder tight end for the Chargers. And we'll get into this a little more with some other guys, Russ, as far as, buy low, sell high. But let's talk about Bryant and Gates specifically as they come back. Martavis Bryant had a lot of hype heading into the season. A lot of people viewed him as the clear-cut number 2 option in that Pittsburgh passing game. Obviously had some issues. He was suspended for the first 4 games. Then you've got the Roethlisberger injury just last week. So with all that said, Russ, where are you dropping Martavis as far as rankings go?
I like him. Wheaton had his shot, and things just
Marcus Wheaton is not good. I'm just going to tell people that. That's my hot take, which isn't even that hot. Marcus Wheaton, not good.
As a Marcus Wheaton fan from previously, I'm sort of waving the white flag here. Everything went wrong. Roethlisberger got hurt. Last game, Wheaton got destroyed on a block, and he just was out for the whole game. And it was just like his whole opportunity. He did well per catch, but he's not stopping Martavis Bryant from having a huge role when he comes back. So I'm buying him. If you can get him for really cheap right now, he's a great move. So
are you
in terms of a range, probably going forward, I'd say he's in the high 30s for wide receivers per week. Okay. So
like a wide receiver 3 maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I would agree with that. I think the potential was there to be a wide receiver 2 if Roethlisberger hadn't gotten hurt, but with that injury, I mean, look, I'm as big a Michael Vick fan as there is. I definitely rode him to a couple fantasy championships, but he is not what he used to be, and he's definitely not Ben Roethlisberger. So,
right.
Look, even last week we saw the effect. Antonio Bryant's streak of 5 catches for 50 yards was broken after literally over 2 years. So,
Antonio Brown, we still love you.
Look, that's an outlier. He's still the top receiver, but
yeah, the fact
that's the thing that I think. Well, that's the thing that scares me is, look, Roethlisberger has one of the best deep balls in the game, and that's Martavis Bryant's MO. So if you don't do that, I'm very curious to see if they're going to be able to replicate what they did last year. I hope they do, because look, adding another weapon to that offense is just scary, quite honestly. But I don't know with Michael Vick in there, man. It gives me some serious pause. I'm probably more like the wide receiver 4 range until Roethlisberger gets back. But again, I'm fairly conservative on that estimate. Michael Vick scares me, which I never thought I'd say. But
yeah, he's a boom bust wide receiver 3 for me. Like, I think Darius Hayward-Bay did all right, so it's kind of like, all right, Martavis Bryant's way better than him, so maybe he can figure something out. But yeah, no, there's definitely that risk involved. I agree.
Yeah. So I would say I still agree with your assessment, meaning if you can get him for cheap, I think you definitely should.
Yeah.
Because luckily the Roethlisberger injury not season ending, so he will be back in a few weeks. It may not be as soon as we like, but he will be back, and I think Bryant will be the main beneficiary of that. So. All right, let's move on to another player coming back from suspension, Russ, Mr. Antonio Gates, who I think probably first broke into the NFL when you and I were probably like in high school or junior high or something. But nonetheless, it was a long time ago. He's coming back. Obviously, had sort of a renaissance last year. Him and Phillip Rivers just keep defying time. And I don't know how they do it, and I don't know what deal they made, but they do. But
I know what deal Antonio Gates made.
Well, touche, and we all do, and he was promptly punished for it. But hey, he didn't get caught last year, so
yeah.
But nonetheless, he did finish as a top 5 tight end last year. I think people had their doubts even before the suspension that he could replicate that. But what do you think? Now that he's active and now that he will play in week 5, and look, the Chargers have not fallen off a cliff. They still have Phillip Rivers slinging it out there, so they're still going to get a lot of targets and a lot of looks. So, where do you see Antonio Gates starting right now?
The gate is opening wide.
Oh, nice.
Hot wow, that was not on purpose. That was not.
Are you sure? That was pretty coincidental, Russ.
That was too good for me to actually have planned that. But
if you say so.
But Stevie Johnson and Malcolm Floyd both got hurt in the last game. So Rivers is looking good. Keenan Allen is finally looking like a legitimate weapon that teams have to account for. Danny Woodhead's been sort of annoying in the past game for all the defenses. So I think this sets up perfectly. He's got a nice matchup against the Steelers. So this could be a nice return week for him.
I think so. I mean, look, I still think he's going to be Phillip Rivers' favorite target. I mean, look, Keenan Allen, I think, is the wide receiver 1 there, as he should be. But look, him and Rivers have been doing this for, over 10 years now. So you can't deny that they instinctively know the other one and can benefit from that. So where, I guess, in rankings, Russ, would you put Antonio Gates? I mean, I personally think he's an obvious tight end 1, but is that sort of more low end? Is he middle tier? Where are you putting him?
Right behind Eifert right now. So that'd be like tight end 5 or tight end 4, somewhere around there. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's a little high for now, but I'd rather get to him before everyone else does than sort of be late to the party on him.
Yeah. Look, last year, and given the substances aside, when he was 34, he reeled off 69 catches for 821 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's amazing. As a 34-year-old tight end, that's unheard of. So, whatever he's doing, he should keep doing it. Just try not to get caught next time.
And for whatever reason, when you just brought up Keenan Allen, it kind of clicked for me. This might be an issue for him. Gates might start taking a little bit of his production. I mean, I think Keenan Allen's playing awesome this year, but 12 touchdowns last year, I mean, and Keenan Allen's been getting the bulk of the touchdowns in the passing game so far. So that's something to look out for potentially.
Well, who knows? He could be a sell high candidate, Russ, but we'll get to that in just a second. Before that, remember, it's already like the playoffs thanks to 1 Week Fantasy at DraftKings.com. Millions are being won each week with every play and every game that could take you closer to a life-changing payday. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use the promo code PFF to play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. That's PFF for a free entry at DraftKings.com. So which you and I, Russ, will get into a little bit later as far as some things we already can see for week 5. But before then, for our redraft friends, let's get into some sell high, buy low candidates, which, it's not as if the trade deadline is next week for anyone, but, it's going to be here sooner than you think, and probably want to jump on some of these guys sooner rather than later. So without further ado.
Nothing flies by quicker than the fantasy season. So, yeah, it's going to be here before you can even imagine.
Well, and yeah, Mike Evans will have 200 yards, and it'll be too late to trade for him. Which, speaking of, Russ, let's cover Mike Evans to begin with. Obviously, not the wide receiver one production so far that I think all of us pegged him for. He's still recovering from an injury that's nagging him a little bit. But he is finally healthy. He is finally playing. I think it's pretty obvious he's definitely not valued where he should be. But I guess the question is, how high should we value him in light of the first month or so?
It's become increasingly clear that the Buccaneers have decided, Jameis Winston, we're throwing you out here, and you're going to figure it out. And sometimes that ends in 4 interceptions. Boy, is he
figuring it out.
Sometimes that ends in 4 interception games, and I don't think every week isn't going to be against Carolina. Carolina's emerging as a top 5 defense right now. So, and Josh Norman is a high-end cornerback 1 right now. So he's not going to be there every week. I think things are going to open up for Evans. But I do think maybe the matchup is more important for him. Like if he's going up against a high-end corner, maybe you want to tread lightly that week or something. But, I mean, if you can grab him now for cheap, he still has that immense potential that he had that run last year where he was getting like 2 touchdowns a game. So that's still there. Jameis is going to hopefully get better as the season gets on. And Vincent Jackson isn't going to go for 150 yards every week. So things will get better.
You say that, Russ, but no, he won't. But I think, though, the silver lining in all this is, look, somebody's getting 150 yards in that offense. It's not like it's a complete breakdown and it's not possible to have those kind of stats. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I definitely think the potential is still there for Evans. I mean, let's put it this way. I think it's probably pretty obvious he was drafted fairly high in redraft leagues. So for a lot of these teams that have Evans, they invested a high pick. I think it's fair to say you and I agree, do not sell him yet. Would that be fair?
No, definitely don't sell him. And if you can get him for nothing or cheap, I guess, definitely buy him.
He's the epitome of buy low right now.
Right. Send out offers.
Will be the head of this title.
Send out offers to your panicked 0-3 and 0-4 owners for Evans.
Take advantage. That's what we're all about. All right. So on the flip side, Russ, we've got possibly the I don't know, I would call it the biggest surprise of the fantasy season so far, which is Mr. Devonta Freeman, the Falcons running back who has consecutive 3 rushing touchdown games for some reason. It's kind of funny. He wasn't even the starter to begin the season. It took a rib injury to Tevin Coleman to put Freeman in, not just in the starting lineup, but essentially act as a bell cow. Can he keep this up, Russ? Like what, would the Falcons be unwise to sort of change the combination they got going? Or, are Freeman's days numbered as a workhorse back?
Shame on us, all the fantasy players, because we all didn't see sort of the Atlanta running back situation coming. And through the first few weeks, you saw they were more dedicated to the run this year, but all off season, everyone saw that as a major weakness, and it's just clearly they're awesome. And Devonta Freeman looks awesome. Tevin Coleman looked good when he was in there. I think Freeman has pretty much, he's not only guaranteed himself a part in the committee, but I think he's going to be it's going to be like Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill now, I think. Devonta's going to sort of dominate the pass game and some of the carries, and I think Coleman's going to get 15 carries a game. So I think that's going to be how it goes when Coleman gets back. So I don't think we're going to see quite the ceiling that Freeman's shown off the last few weeks, but I think he's here to stay. Especially in PPR leagues, I think he's going to be pretty consistent as a running back too this year.
Yeah, I like that prediction more than some of the others I've seen, which is, essentially definite running back one. And I like your comparison with him and Tevin Coleman with Hill and Gio Bernard, because I still don't see it with Freeman. I view it more as opportunity than that's him. That's the talent taking over. I mean, look, the first two games he had 10 carries in the first game for 18 yards, 12 carries in the second game for 25 yards. You can't tell me anyone saw this coming. I'm sorry.
That's the other thing. If you watch Freeman's carries in these last two games, they're just opening up humongous holes. So that's just good for everybody involved,
Right. Well, and look, the Falcons they've been good this year. Obviously, they're 4-0. Yesterday against Houston completely obliterated them. So, look, it was okay to run the ball a little more with them. And look, it's pretty obvious the Houston defense is not what we all thought they might be.
Right.
And the same thing with Dallas's defense the week before. So that is a guy that, again, he's the epitome of the sell high for me, right? If you can get a good draft pick for him, I would be all over that, truly. And then I'd probably pick up Tevin Coleman just as a backup and just make sure, hey, I've got somebody in that rotation, because I can't see Freeman dominating the carries the rest of the year when Coleman gets back. Can you?
I'm all about sort of kicking the tires when you have a guy like Freeman who sort of put up high-end production in the first few weeks. Kick the tires on some of these studs that are out of the gate slow. Like we just talked about Mike Evans. You're not going to get Mike Evans for Devonta Freeman, but you might be able to add another good piece and potentially work something out. So yeah, if some of these people are going to get desperate, so hey, I'll always throw a trade offer or ideas out there,
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. And again, I can't. I'm sure Devonta Freeman is a nice person and he's very generous, and he's a good son and all that stuff. But I don't know. I just can't see it, man. I can't. Even yesterday, if you take away the 3 touchdowns, I mean, okay, he had 5 catches for 81 yards. I agree with you. PPR leagues, I think he'll still be pretty good value. But
standard, he's going to get cut out by the legs when Coleman comes.
I have to think that he's not going to get what he's getting now. So, yeah, I would sell high. I'm sorry, Devonta Freeman, but I would sell high on you. All right, next up, let's stay in the division, Russ. I don't know if you've noticed, but this has been an all NFC South edition of sell high, buy low so far. But let's stay there. With another receiver, Brandon Cooks of the Saints. I think that's another guy, Russ, that I would imagine was taken pretty high in drafts this offseason. Obviously has not produced like we all thought he would, being the best option there in New Orleans, or at least what we thought was the best option. So, knowing that people took him pretty high, are you in holy crap, I got to get rid of this guy? Or are you, hey, I'm going to sit tight? Or where are you at?
I'm in hold unless you can get anything relatively close to what he was initially priced at. Because, man, when you watch these games, he's just not separating. Which, for someone who runs a low 4.3, that should never be the problem. And I mean, Breeze is hurt right now. I watched all of his passes today, and he's struggling with his arm strength. Like he can't throw full passes right now. He's kind of almost shot putting it. But obviously it's working because he's a great quarterback. But this should be when Cooks is dominating underneath short routes and taking it and sort of almost running the ball as a slot receiver, but he's not. So if he can't do that, yeah, I have some big concern.
Yeah, I mean, so far on the season, 20 catches, 215 yards through 4 games. That's an average of 5 catches for about 54 yards or so, which will not get it done. That would be wide receiver 3 at best. Yeah, I don't know. I did write about this on a side note for my Dynasty Stock Watch article a couple weeks ago. That look, Cooks was all about the volume. That's what he was gonna make his money on. And without the volume there, it's not gonna happen. He's not the deep threat that can get the big play. So he's very scary to me right now. I view him as sort of quasi toxic. So
that's the biggest part of this. Like, he's in a perfect situation, including last year, where they're going to feed him targets, and he's supposed to be that skilled first round receiver that can make things happen. And he's not right now. So I still think there's some hope. He's still got time to develop, but yeah, I'm worried right now.
He's like a poor man's Jarvis Landry right now, which we wouldn't have thought last year. But look, he had 4 catches for 25 yards last night, Russ.
I know.
That's 6 yards a catch. Okay.
That's
literally Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley ran further than that per rush than Brandon Cooks did on catching the ball. Okay. So I'm very down on Brandon Cooks this year. Extremely down. Anyway, let's maybe go back up to the peak, Russ. We're going to switch divisions, switch positions. Carlos Williams out of Buffalo took over for LaShawn McCoy yesterday, who was out. Didn't do a whole lot in the beginning of the game, but he kind of made up for it, especially towards the end with the Bills mounting sort of a semi-comeback. Caught a very nice ball from Tyrod Taylor. I mean, I think that was a fairly impressive play for your rookie running back to make. So luckily, he did salvage his fantasy day with that. But what about going forward, Russ? I mean, the initial estimate for McCoy is he could be out a couple more weeks. Where does this put Carlos Williams for you as far as running backs go?
The pendulum is swinging for him, and it's almost getting to that point where I'm kicking the tires. I don't think his value is quite high enough yet, but I think if you give it another week of good volume and sort of maybe he'll get another touchdown, I think you can maybe look to make your move to sort of sell. In Dynasty, he's probably a hold for now, but in a redraft league, if he can get sort of another nice game next week, I'd be looking to sell him for sort of like an Eddie Lacy who had a slow start or something like that,
Yeah, and hopefully, like you said, he can sort of build on this week. I mean, only 18 rushes for 40 yards, but like we mentioned, he had 3 catches for 30 yards and that touchdown. He is playing Tennessee next week, so that should be a good matchup for him. He is going to start because it's looking like LaShawn McCoy is definitely out for this week. So I'm with you. I think if you get another good start out of Carlos Williams for redraft leagues only, I think you could definitely sell high on that. Because even if he plays well, I can't imagine Rex and the Bills just handing that job over to him over LaShawn. You know what I mean? At the very least, it's going to be a timeshare.
He's going to muck it up. He's going to at least muck it up. So
right, and that's being optimistic as far as a timeshare. I mean, you would have to have a season-ending injury for McCoy, which, given, not unreasonable, but I don't think anyone wants to bank on that happening. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think if you get another good game, go ahead and sell high on that.
But I will say, as a dynasty owner, that catch, the 30-yard catch is like a blinking red sign of like, ooh. Like, wow, this guy could develop into something. But, yeah, this year.
Well, and look, you're right. In dynasty leagues, just as a quick aside, I can't imagine LaShawn McCoy there next year or being effective next year. So, at the very least, I think Carlos is due for an increased workload next year at the latest. I just have my doubts about this year. So, but I think we're in agreement on that. So, far good. All right, Russ. So we've covered some sell high, buy lows. We've got some players coming back from suspension. Obviously, some injury news in the beginning. With all that said, let's look ahead. Week 5 of DraftKings. Both you and I play. This is not the ad portion of the show. We actually do play and play a lot of it, so bear with us. But
we're not blind. We're not blindly promoting. We love the site.
We are not. So let's just run down some players, Russ, that you see on DraftKings that could be pretty good value. Because as we all know, the key to a successful DraftKings lineup is finding those bargain players. So who are you looking at this week?
I am looking at the Denver Broncos, sort of the Denver Broncos passing game. I love that. I love that spot for them. Peyton's really cheap now. He's going up against Oakland. Demarius he's sort of been not doing great, so not many people will be on him, and Sanders as well. So I kind of like that as a vintage Broncos week. So I like all three of those guys in a cash game together, and even maybe in a tournament.
Yeah, and it's funny to think of anything with Denver, of reminiscing about better times. But you're right. I mean, it's obviously not the offensive juggernaut it has been the last couple of years. But that doesn't mean a guy like Peyton still isn't going to throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns in a game. They may not be the 80-yard bombs that we're all used to. But look, for $7,000, he's the 7th-ranked quarterback.
Yeah.
As far as price goes, which I'm with you. I think that's a fantastic value. So, looking at running backs, which to me, my personal strategy whenever I play DraftKings for running backs is always to get, I don't want to say the cheapest option, but those guys that are really, really low, priced really low. And for the first month or so, you could get away with a Devonta Freeman or a Carlos Williams being priced extremely low, like literally in the $4,000 range. But, the prices, unfortunately, have been updated. So if you want Devonta Freeman, it's going to cost you $6,300 as opposed to $4,300. But that doesn't mean there's still not very good values there. For me, look, I am going to ride the Dion Lewis train as long as it's running. Okay.
Oh, what's he at this week?
4,800.
Yeah.
And he's averaging 19 fantasy points, which is, the price has him in the 20s, which, every week, and DraftKings obviously is PPR, he's getting 20 points a game. Until they price him higher than 5 something, I'm going to take that all day.
Yeah, and a few of the guys we talked about before, Todd Gurley, 4,300. He's in line for
Todd Gurley's 4,300. Holy!
Yeah,
I just found my running back combo.
Yeah, so there you go. I think that'd be a great idea. Martavis is 3,800. Obviously, we said that's a boom bust, but if you're playing in a tournament, maybe throw him in there
for 38. Look, you're gonna have to take a risk on one of the positions, and I would believe me. I may be down on him on his potential, but that doesn't mean he still can't produce something. And for 3,800, believe me, all you're looking for is double-digit points, which I think he could very easily do that.
Right. And as you mentioned, Antonio Gates, 4,200. So with Stevie Johnson and Malcolm Floyd hurt, so that's pretty nice.
I literally think, Russ, we just reeled off my roster, one of them for this week. I'm not even kidding.
And then if you have all those guys in there, you can add some really high-end players.
Well, yeah, that's my point. If if you're averaging 4,500 for players and you've got half your roster taken care of, then you're going to be pretty set. So anyway, but well, good. No, that was some. Wow, I still can't believe those players are priced that low. Well, everyone go out and get them now.
we got to go, guys. We got to go make
them. I know. So. But no, that was good. Yeah, good to be back, Russ. You and I will be back, of course, next week. We will cover everything about week 5. But until next time, we'll see you later.